Don't give up. Dark times teach you a great deal. That's why you should never regret what you've been through. Instead, be grateful for all the lessons it taught you. Some things break you down just to reveal the full strength that has always been within you. The problem doesn't lie in the failures you face in life, but in how powerfully you rise afterward. When you refuse to believe in yourself, you abandon the greatest power you've ever had, the belief in yourself. I used to believe that I lacked motivation. Not in a vague way, but with absolute certainty. I looked at people who woke up early, worked consistently, and progressed year after year, and I concluded that they had something I did not, some inner fire, an inborn willpower, a different mental structure, and I did not have it. I started many things with enthusiasm. I read, I made plans, I imagined who I would become, but there was always a familiar moment when the emotions faded, when everything became heavy, when no one was cheering anymore, and right at that moment, I stopped. No noise, no declaration of quitting, just slowing down and then disappearing. For a long time, I forgave myself for this. I called it listening to myself, not pushing too hard, waiting for a better time. But deep inside, there was a very uncomfortable feeling that I did not want to name. I did not lose because I was weak. I lost because I always gave myself an escape route. There was a very ordinary morning. No incident, no major disappointment. I sat at my desk, looked at my to-do list, and did nothing. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I didn't want the discomfort that comes with starting. And for the first time, I did not try to rationalize it. I simply looked straight at that truth. I did not lack motivation. I lacked the ability to force myself to continue when motivation was gone. That moment changed the way I understood discipline entirely. Discipline is not the feeling of wanting to do something. Discipline is action that happens regardless of what feeling is present. But what no one clearly tells you is this: forcing yourself is not an act of violence. It is not self-abuse. It is an art. And like any art, it has structure, principles, and subtlety. The problem is that most of us only know a crude version of forcing ourselves. We think we must hate ourselves enough to move forward. We must scold ourselves, compare ourselves, apply constant pressure, and then when we burn out, we conclude that discipline is not for us. I was like that. Every time I broke a promise to myself, I lost a bit of inner credibility. No one could see it, but I felt it clearly. Every time I said I would do something tomorrow and then didn't, some part of me learned, this promise does not need to be taken seriously. And eventually, I realized a very uncomfortable truth. I no longer trusted myself, not in a dramatic sense, but in a very quiet way. I still set goals, but I no longer emotionally invested in them. Because deep down, I had become used to the idea that I would not go all the way. There is a sentence I once heard that haunted me for a long time. You do not lack discipline. You are simply too skilled at negotiating with your own weakness. Every morning, that negotiation takes place. I'm tired today. Just rest a bit. Doing less is fine. I'll make up for it tomorrow. And what is dangerous is that every reason sounds reasonable. But victory does not come from reasonable excuses. Victory comes from actions that are not negotiable. I began to observe the people I once thought were strong, and I noticed a very strange common point. They did not talk much about their emotions, not because they did not have emotions, but because emotions did not have veto power. They did not wait until they felt ready. They did not wait until they felt confident. They acted first and let emotions follow. And this goes against almost all popular advice. People tell you that you must believe in yourself first, that you must have motivation first, that you must feel right first. But reality works in the opposite direction. You do not win because you believe. You believe because you have won enough times, even very small ones. The moment I understood that, my concept of forcing myself changed completely. It was no longer a confrontation between two parts of myself. It became a new agreement, a new structure. I did not ask myself whether I wanted to or not. I only asked, what is the minimum task and when will I do it? No emotion, no negotiation. And strangely enough, when I stopped arguing with myself, energy began to return. Not the energy of excitement, but the energy of clarity. In the next part, we will break down a very common illusion that has caused millions of people to lose without understanding why. The illusion that you need inspiration to begin, and the real price that being too lenient with yourself quietly takes over the years. There is a lie that is repeated so often that it starts to sound like the truth. If you are passionate enough, you will not need to force yourself. If something is truly meant for you, you will naturally want to do it every day. That lie sounds beautiful, and it has ruined countless lives. Because there is no worthwhile path that does not pass through long stretches of emotional emptiness. There is no skill that is built only on days of excitement. And there is no victory that comes from acting only when you feel comfortable. The uncomfortable truth is this: inspiration is not fuel, it is a reward. And if you wait for the reward before doing the work, you will remain stuck at the starting line forever. I fell into that trap for a long time. Every time I did not feel like doing something, I asked myself, is this a sign that I am on the wrong path? And every time I asked that question, I allowed myself to stop. I called it listening to my intuition. But then I realized that what I called intuition was, most of the time, simply the mind's resistance to discomfort. The mind hates discomfort. It is programmed to avoid it, and it is very skilled at dressing avoidance in reasonable language. There is a man named Michael. He starts training seriously. The first week he is full of energy. The second week, his body aches. The third week, work gets busy. And then the familiar voice appears. Maybe I should take a break to recover. It sounds scientific, it sounds mature. But the truth is that if Michael takes a break, he will lose momentum. And once momentum is lost, quitting becomes much easier. Not because he is weak, but because the brain always chooses the path of least friction. This is the real cost of being lenient with yourself. It does not kill you instantly, it erodes you. It teaches the mind that whenever discomfort appears, there is an exit. And once that exit exists, the brain will look for it every time. You do not lose in big decisions. You lose in very small concessions. Every time you say, resting today is fine. Every time you say, doing less won't hurt. Every time you say, I'll wait until I feel inspired. You are sending a very clear message to yourself. This promise is negotiable. And when everything is negotiable, you no longer have discipline. You only have moods. There is a paradox that only people who go far enough truly understand. Discipline does not take away your freedom. It buys your freedom back, one day at a time. Because when you no longer have to decide every morning whether you will act or not, you free up an enormous amount of energy. Forcing yourself, in its correct form, is not rigidity. It is setting simple rules so you do not have to argue with yourself. For example, not exercising when you feel like it, but exercising at a fixed time. Not writing when inspiration comes, but writing for 10 minutes, even when your mind is empty. 10 minutes will not change your life, but 10 minutes every day will change how you see yourself. Because every time you do what you said you would do, you win. Not in a big way, not loudly, but enough to restore something very important: inner trust. When you start believing that you will do what you say, even when you do not want to, you enter a different game. A game where victory no longer depends on emotion. In the next part, we will go into the hardest part of the art of forcing yourself. How to overcome inner resistance at the exact moment it appears, not with self-scolding, but with structure and an understanding of how the mind works. There is a moment when every plan fails, not when you have not started yet, but when you know exactly what you need to do and still do not want to do it. That is the moment of inner resistance. It does not appear as intense emotion. It comes quietly. A heaviness in the chest, a very simple thought, not now. And if you do not understand the mechanics of this moment, you will lose here again and again. Resistance is not a sign that you are on the wrong path. It is a sign that you are approaching the edge of growth. The brain does not resist familiar tasks. It only resists actions that could change your current position. Every time you are about to do something meaningful, the brain asks one question: will this make me unsafe? And because the brain is conservative, it often answers yes. And then a whole set of delay tactics appears. Checking your phone a little longer, reorganizing your desk, reading one more article just to be sure. All of these look like preparation, but in reality, they are avoidance. There is a man named Lucas. He decides to write every day. Not much, just one page. The first day, he succeeds. The second day, it is harder. On the third day, before writing, he suddenly feels the urge to read more material. He tells himself, what if I write without enough knowledge? Lucas is not lazy, he is afraid. Afraid of writing something mediocre, afraid of seeing his own limits, afraid that if he tries his hardest and is still not good enough, he will have no excuse left to hope. This is where many people misunderstand themselves. They think they lack discipline, but in reality, they are protecting their ego. Because when you have not tried your hardest, you can still say that you have potential. Forcing yourself at this level is not about pushing harder. It is about shrinking the battle. Instead of asking, did I perform well today? Ask, did I show up? The brain fears big battles, but it offers little resistance to steps so small they seem insignificant. And this is the real art. You do not win with force. You win by not giving the mind a chance to vote. There is a brutally effective principle. When it is time, you start, regardless of your internal state. No evaluation, no waiting, no negotiation. 5 minutes is enough. One tiny action is enough. Because the hardest moment is always the moment of starting. Once you have started, most resistance dissolves, not because you are stronger, but because the brain has switched modes. There is a sentence I deeply believe. You do not need discipline for the whole day. You only need discipline for the first moment. Another thing very few people realize, the strongest resistance usually appears right before you make a real leap. And if you quit here, the brain learns a very dangerous lesson. If I wait long enough, discomfort will disappear without action. And then it will do the same thing next time. Forcing yourself, when done correctly, does not make you hate life. It makes you respect yourself. Because every time you do what you committed to do, even in a very small way, you send a clear signal. I am someone who says what I will do and does it. In the next part, we will connect all of these ideas into a system. Not to turn you into a machine, but to help you win in a sustainable way, even on days when you absolutely do not want to. There is a major misunderstanding about victory. People think winning is a feeling of excitement, a moment when everything flows smoothly, a time when you feel strong, focused, and untouched by doubt. But if you wait for that state, you will win very little. Real victory, at the level of everyday life, usually happens on very boring days. Days with no intense emotions. Days when you simply do what needs to be done, then close it, with no celebration, no pride, and no self-criticism. That is why you need a system, not a state. A system does not care how you feel, it only cares whether you show up. Look back at all the times you quit halfway. Most of the time, it was not because you did not know what to do, it was because you had to make too many decisions. Every day, every hour, you had to ask yourself, should I do it today or not? And every time you asked, you opened an internal courtroom. On one side was reason, on the other side was fatigue. And very often, fatigue won. A system exists to end that courtroom. When you have a fixed time, a fixed action, and a fixed minimum, you no longer have to persuade yourself. You simply execute. And while this sounds simple, it represents a massive psychological shift. You move from someone who must ask permission from emotions to someone who acts according to structure. There is a man named Thomas. He does not have iron willpower. In fact, he gets discouraged very easily. But he does one thing very differently. He does not aim to win big. He only aims not to break the chain. Every day, he performs an action so small it almost feels ridiculous. But he does it at the same time, in the same way, without variation. And strangely, after a while, it no longer feels like forcing himself. It becomes part of his identity, not because he loves it, but because he is used to being the person who does that thing. Identity always follows action, never precedes it. You do not become disciplined and then act. You act long enough and discipline appears as a consequence. A good system does not try to turn you into a perfect version of yourself. It only needs to work on bad days. Because if it only functions when you feel good, it is useless. Let your system answer 3 questions for you. When to act, how long to act, and what the minimum requirement is. No questions about motivation. No questions about emotion. No questions about quality. Quality comes later, much later. At this stage, forcing yourself no longer means fighting against who you are. It is more like locking a door in advance, so that when you are weak, you cannot sabotage yourself. You do not need to be stronger. You need fewer choices. And there is one truth that very few people are willing to accept. You will never feel ready for a higher version of yourself. If you wait until you feel worthy, you will stay where you are. The feeling of worthiness always comes after action, never before. In the final part, we will talk about what keeps all of this from collapsing over time, how to live with long-term discomfort, how to force yourself without becoming bitter, and how to redefine victory so that you do not just win a phase, but win the long game. There will come a time after you have built a system, after you have become used to showing up, after you have won enough small battles, when you begin to feel a different kind of exhaustion. Not exhaustion from failing, but exhaustion from constantly forcing yourself. If you do not understand this phase, you will think something is wrong, that you have gone too far, that discipline is stealing your joy, but the truth is far more subtle. You are not tired because of discipline. You are tired because discipline is playing the wrong role. Forcing yourself is not a state you must maintain forever at the same intensity. It is a tool to carry you through phases where your natural instincts are not yet strong enough to pull you forward. When action has become habit, the role of force must gradually decrease. Otherwise, discipline turns into a prison instead of a launch pad. There is a very clear sign that you are doing this right. It is when you begin to feel uncomfortable not doing the action, not because you fear failure, but because it no longer matches how you see yourself. At that point, you are no longer forcing yourself. You are simply living in alignment with a new identity. But before you reach that point, you must learn one crucial skill: living with long-term discomfort without becoming bitter. Many people can force themselves for a few weeks, but they do it with hatred, with anger, with comparison, and as a result, even if they improve, they do not want to continue. That kind of victory is not sustainable. Forcing yourself to win does not mean denying who you are. It means accepting that there will be days when you do not like what you must do and still doing it with a neutral attitude. No judgment, no romanticizing, no dramatizing. There is a powerful calmness in saying, I do not like this today, but I am doing it anyway. That calmness is a sign of maturity. And this is how you redefine victory, not as a good feeling, not as immediate results, but as the ability to keep your word to yourself repeatedly over a long enough period of time. Every day you do what you committed to do, you place another brick in your self-respect. No one sees it, no one applauds, but you know. And that changes how you stand in this world. At some point, you will look back and realize that you no longer need to push yourself as much. You no longer negotiate. You no longer ask whether you are capable. You simply act as a natural part of who you have become. Victory at that point is not loud, but it is solid. There is one sentence I want you to carry with you, not as a slogan, but as a principle for living. You do not need to feel ready to win. You only need to refuse to quit at critical moments. And if one day you slip, you do not start over from zero. You return to the system. You return to the minimum action, and you continue. That is the true art of forcing yourself to win. Not winning once, but winning long enough for it to become your life.